Hello and welcome. Join me as I traverse 100 years of horror cinema, one flick at a time. It is an obvious choice, but how could there be a discussion of horror cinema without this all-time classic? 1931 Dracula. The first sound-era supernatural horror film, but is it the best? Directed by Tod Browning and produced by Carl Laemmle Jr., who had taken over from his father in 1928. Jr. would bring about further change and many more hits in the coming years, but more on him in future episodes. Bela Lugosi had played the titular role on stage and was ultimately a logical choice, although it only came about after the untimely death of Lon Chaney. Dracula with Chaney as his first sound film would have been an interesting alternate timeline, but we lucky few did well with Lugosi. The book had been adapted into the unofficial Nosferatu almost a decade earlier. Additionally, 3 highly successful stage plays were produced. This was of course common, as early cinema was all about adaptations, as it has always been. One such play starred several of the same actors as in this film, including Van Sloan as Dr. Helsing and of course Lugosi. Every impersonation of vampires, cartoonish and hyperbolic, have been an exaggeration of this man. His heavily accented English from his Hungarian background, modern-day Romania, and not far from Transylvania, set the tone beautifully as it matched the vaguely old-time European sets and wonderful and moody lighting. The plot has been done to death, but in effect, Dwight Frye, playing the iconic Renfield, goes to Dracula's castle and is taken by Dracula, turned into a slave of this otherworldly master. Upon returning to England, Dracula seeks out the affections of some local women for all time. Gone, for all but a reference by Frye, is the sense of impending doom by plague so prevalent in the Nosferatu films. What works, what doesn't? The aforementioned mood is absolutely pitch perfect, but is at its best in the first act and returns briefly in the finale. Once they return to well-lit houses and Dracula pursues chaos in the civilized world, it starts to feel a little staged. It is not a huge issue, but some of the theatricality of the stage version becomes more obvious. Most notably when Dracula's identity is revealed and Lugosi is forced to perform hypnotism in one flat, wide shot. Speaking of the camera work, Browning's direction is static throughout, which was common at the time. Talking pictures, true sound films, had only been around for about 3 years and only commonplace for about 1 year. This was a time of bigger, clunkier cameras which limited creativity. Not Browning's fault, but it does mean that staging and pacing feel a little slow compared to films that followed only a few years later, and at times positively glacial compared to modern films. In the first act, by far the strongest of the film, there are clever uses of extreme close-ups and zooms by moving the camera closer to the subject. Staging in the jaw-dropping sets is unparalleled in horror cinema. Sadly, the film does not maintain this standard, although the early foggy scenes in London help maintain a dour mood. Notably, music is largely absent and used only in the title and end credits, except for a few ominous stings when outlining Lugosi's hypnotic stare or during a concert. The music is playing in scene, as a musical soundtrack was not yet common in films. A side note, the theatre set was the one used by Universal to make Chaney's masterpiece, The Phantom of the Opera, only 5 years prior. What saves this? The stunning set work, the performances of Lugosi and Frye, the haunting creepy vibe, especially Dracula's castle, and some interesting editing trickery to give Lugosi's performance a haunting and timeless quality. Much of this credit must go to Karl Freund, cinematographer and legend of German cinema. His most notable work belongs to the legendary Metropolis of 1927, otherwise known as the footage used by Queen for their Radio Gaga film clip some 60 years later. Supposedly, he did some filming as well, and is perhaps worthy of an unofficial director's credit, although this is somewhat unclear through the sands of time. Returning to performances, Renfield, as played by Dwight Frye, is truly a standout of the picture. It is over the top, and his iconic maniacal laugh would haunt the man himself, with public imitations upon his recognition for years to come. An interesting scene shows Frye approaching an unconscious woman, the maid, laying on the ground. He crawls to her with ill intent in his eye. The scene cuts away, leaving the audience to wonder what depravity would take place. However, with some background sleuthing by yours truly, it is clear that the insect-eating Renfield was only interested in a morsel on her cheek. This choice of editing gives the deranged character a more sinister persona. This all sounds a bit mixed, so is this a truly iconic timeless classic, or does it get a free pass simply because it was the first of these universal classics? Yes and no. The static staging and occasionally slow pace means it is probably not the first film someone should watch if they were interested in getting into this era and genre. The Wolfman of 1941, starring Lon Chaney Jr., should be your first visit. However, this film does enough well, spectacularly so, that it deserves to go down as one of the all-time classics. The performances, the sets, the mood, all of these are a sight to behold and make this an absolutely essential viewing experience for any horror fan. Enjoy.